Cannibalism is a topic that I never really expected to talk about on this channel, but the idea of it has been around for so many centuries and it's still seen in the modern era. It's become such a popular subject that many TV shows, movies, video games, and yes, even anime and manga have covered it a lot. Recently, a horror series called Gannibal has become the talk of the town for adding a unique twist on the cannibalism genre. The series has gotten so popular that it even got its own live-action adaptation on Disney+, with a season 2 already announced. So today, we're going to dive deeper into why this series is so popular and what makes it better than any other cannibalistic series out there.
But if you guys want to see more anime content like this one, then why not go down and hit that subscribe button.
Also, make sure to join our Discord server to join our community and get announcements about videos, lives, and merch. But without further ado, let's get on with the video. For over 200,000 years of mankind, there has existed a culture of cannibalism. Even still, it exists in certain places in the world. Perhaps even a Japanese village, but surely not in this village though. A new police officer named Daigo has just transferred from the city to Kuge village. While some residents are welcoming, most see him as just an outsider. His wife, Yuki, and daughter, Mashiro, often visit him at work, as the village is certainly quiet. They enjoy the peaceful life but remain vigilant. Daigo is determined not to meet the same fate as his predecessor. The story is that the last officer had a huge debt from gambling and disappeared, saying weird stuff like the villagers are Before he could finish, a call comes in. They said they found a body. Daigo climbs up a hill with a rowdy long-haired hunter named Kisuke, who teases him about his agility. They eventually reach a gruesome scene, the mauled corpse of a Goto family member, most likely killed by a bear. Kisuke vows to hunt down the bear, but Daigo notices something odd. The corpse has a human bite mark on the arm, positioned in a way that makes self-infliction impossible. When Daigo points this out, Kisuke gets defensive, accusing Daigo of suggesting Goto family abuse. Tensions rise, and Kisuke pulls out his shotgun, aiming it at Daigo's head. The other hunters in the family encourage Kisuke, but Daigo quickly apologizes, and Kisuke reveals that it was just a practical joke. Although the hunters laugh, Daigo isn't amused. Still, they invite him and his family to join them for drinks later that night, emphasizing the importance of building a good relationship with the villagers, something that the last officer failed to do. Daigo and Yuki argue about him going out drinking, but he ultimately joins the hunters, lying that his family couldn't make it because they're visiting Yuki's hometown. The hunters see through the lie though. Everyone in the village knows what he does and when he does it. Meanwhile, Mashiro sneaks out in the middle of the night as Yuki, realizing they're living in the last officer's house, notices a carving on the wall, saying, "Run away." At the bar, Daigo discusses the rumors the last officer spread about the villagers being cannibals, which the hunters laugh off. Elsewhere, Mashiro wanders alone on a snowy road and encounters an old man with a cart filled with chopped limbs and a bloody finger in his mouth. The hunters plan to hunt down the bear in the morning, warning Daigo to be cautious. When Daigo returns home, Yuki shows him the eerie carving. He checks on Mashiro, who is safely asleep, but has a splash of blood on her. She wakes, and hands him something that shocks him to his core. The next morning, Daigo joins the hunters on the mountain, but a young hunter named Yusuke lags behind, not wanting to be left with the outsider. Kisuke emphasizes that the mountains are hunter territory and doesn't like it when outsiders interfere. While getting lost in the woods, Daigo receives a call from a pathologist named Nakamura, who reveals that the finger Mashiro found doesn't belong to the woman, but to someone else. Suddenly, a shot rings out, missing Daigo. It's Yusuke, who initially fired to get Daigo's attention. They encounter the bear, which attacks Daigo, but Yusuke kills it with a single shot. Kisuke and the hunters celebrate, and Daigo is no longer seen as an outsider. They dissect the bear, confirming that it killed their grandmother, and Kisuke demands Daigo to eat a piece of his grandmother's flesh as a sign of respect. At that moment, Daigo realizes that the villagers are indeed cannibals. Already in just half of the first volume, so much stuff has occurred that I literally had to split these into two parts. I really enjoyed this part of the volume. I love the family and the mystery around this entire town. The art is very high definition and the artist loves to work with shades. It definitely helps out a lot when designing the different characters like Kisuke. A majority of the backgrounds don't even look like drawings. The backgrounds look like pictures taken from real life, which the mangaka Masaki Ninomiya stated were drawn by combining various photos he has taken, but since he doesn't have much reference material, he draws them all on his own. Daigo is an interesting main character. He seems really nice and the way that he handles situations is very realistic. Daigo being an outsider is actually inspired by the mangaka's real life experience. In an interview with Manga-splaining, Ninomiya states that the feeling of being enclosed exists everywhere, whether you're in the city or the courtside. I entered a company in a city made up of only locals, and they treated me like a proper outsider. The foreign entity entering any completed environment has it hard regardless of era and place. Daigo and his family are really wholesome as well, but like I said before, it's also really realistic. Him and Yuki fight, but nothing that would impact their love, which is a pretty small detail, but it just shows character. The townfolk are very sketchy, but I feel like they're a little bit too sketchy. From the beginning we knew that the story was about cannibals, and the different implications across the chapters show that the villagers are not what they seem. The villagers are clearly cannibals, but it could just be something that they wanted to get out of the way quickly. Or they could just be trying to misdirect us from the bigger twist and mystery. I say this because the final scene with the eating of the grandmother's flesh isn't as bad as you think cannibalism is. When you think of eating people in the media, they usually go over the top with it. However, here they're practicing cannibalism in a way to pay respect and mourn the dead. In the 1500s, cannibalism was a way to mourn the dead in a way we do funerals now. They would eat the bodies as an act of affection or to mourn. Obviously, now the practice has been completely demolished in most areas. However, I feel like the village still does these practices and one cannibal has just taken it too far, aka the old man that we see with a finger on the road. I think the story is trying to mislead us into thinking that the villagers are the villains, when in reality there's just a big bad lurking in the background. After the hunt, Yuki picks up Daigo with Mashiro, who hasn't spoken since the incident. Daigo blames himself, but Yuki comforts and reassures him. As they drive, they pass a mysterious woman on the road. The next day, Daigo investigates the fate of the last officer, Osamu Kano, starting with his daughter, Sumire Kano. Kisuke invites Daigo to a funeral ceremony for the victim, while Mashiro enters elementary school. During the ritual, villagers must cover their faces, but they realize an extra person is present. The mysterious woman from the road reveals herself as Sumire Kano, who claims that her father was murdered. Confronting her, Kisuke dismisses her accusations, but she kicks over the coffin, revealing it to be empty. Sumire says, "There's nobody to bury because they've already eaten her." A mob starts to form, but Kisuke distracts the angry crowd, giving Daigo a chance to take Sumire away. Before they can escape though, a smelly man with his face covered attacks the crowd, causing chaos. Sumire explains to Daigo that the villagers eat the dead to pay respects, inheriting their souls as part of a mourning process, a practice repeated for decades worldwide. She adds that the last time she saw her father, he was fighting with the Goto family, suggesting that they are somehow involved in the recent events. Determined to investigate, Daigo heads to the Goto family property. A tree falls in his path, but a man related to Kisuke chops it up, allowing Daigo to proceed. But before letting him go, the man shows Daigo a recording of Kano's last known sighting. The footage depicts Kano, angry and distressed, accusing the Goto family of cannibalism. Despite the man's obvious instability, Daigo decides to use it as evidence and continues his investigation for Sumire's sake. Meanwhile, the man discusses with another, hinting that he, the old man from the first chapter, will deal with Daigo. Back at home, a neighbor warns Yuki about the barbaric nature of the Goto family. Meanwhile, the Goto family discusses Daigo's investigation, and one member decides to hunt him down. As Daigo investigates the property, he senses someone stalking him and recording him in the same spot as the footage. Suddenly, a man points a rifle at Daigo's head, demanding that he leaves. Daigo remains calm, refusing to go. When the man pulls the trigger, Daigo swiftly disarms him, taking the rifle away. Though very calm, Daigo is unnerved by the man's intent to kill. Returning home, Yuki finds Kisuke, Yusuke, and another man inside her house. She demands to know their purpose as more Goto family members enter. They aren't looking for Daigo, they're after her. We cut back to Daigo as he takes down the 3 men, arresting them. One of the men warns Daigo that it's too late and that he won't let you go. As Daigo prepares to take them away, the elderly members of the Goto family plead with him to let him handle the matter. Daigo asks who he is, only to find out when the old man swings a scythe towards his head. The final scene is Nakamura trying to call Daigo, but it leads to voicemail. He has found the identity of the finger that he sent him. It's none other than the last officer, Osamu Kano. As many of you know, I love a good mystery series, and this story is filled with them. We learned that I was right about the villagers participating in cannibalism for mourning and respect. However, it's not all of the villagers, but a specific family called the Gotos. Another big mystery is the last officer, Osamu Kano. He decided to go after the Goto family for cannibalism, which is not legal in Japan, but I feel like it's an overreaction going to their property waving a gun around. Unless, like I said in the last part, the old man is committing multiple murders that end in cannibalism. But other than that, one of my favorite mysteries of this series revolves around Daigo and his family. Why did Daigo get transferred from a city to a middle of nowhere village? What was the incident that caused Mashiro to be mute? And how is Daigo responsible for it? These are the biggest questions I had reading, and it made me engaged in the overall story going forward. The only real problem I have is some of the side characters aren't really that interesting, and it's pretty difficult to keep up with like the whole Goto family, but I'm not really interested in Yusuke or this guy or even the 3 dudes that tried to kill Daigo anyway. Sumire was a great twist character, but I honestly don't think we need her in the story moving forward. I mean, she's not a detective or a cop, so I think just having a kid's sidekick would just be very unnecessary for the plot. I think this is one of the best ways to end a volume, and it keeps me coming back for more. Daigo is found unconscious, floating in a river by the police. He wakes up in the hospital, his family by his side, and the Goto family standing in front of him. Though he's obviously angry, Kisuke and the others apologize for their violent family members, explaining that they were trying to protect Yuki and Mashiro. One family member apologizes for his brother cutting Daigo's forehead, but Daigo corrects him that it wasn't his brother, but an old man. Kisuke mentions that 2 of the attackers have turned themselves in, but 1 remains at large. Daigo starts to recall the incident and realizes that the old man was the same one from the funeral, recognized by his foul odor. Kisuke mocks Daigo, who responds by kicking them out. Later, Matsuo Goto finds Daigo's phone, listens to the voicemail, and texts Nakamura to arrange a meeting. Daigo tries to leave the hospital to arrest Matsuo, leaving the police escorts to protect his family. Outside his house, Sumire tells Daigo that she's leaving the village, but gives him another clue, the last phone number her father called. Before she leaves, she tells Daigo that Kisuke is different from the other family members. Yuki expresses her desire to leave the village, fearing for their safety after the last officer's death and Daigo's near fatal encounter. Daigo agrees she should leave, but she insists that she won't go without him. Daigo tries to call Nakamura, unaware that Matsuo is planning an ambush. Daigo heads to the hospital with another cop. There, he meets with the police chief and discusses his attack at the Goto residence. The chief and 2 other professionals are shocked by Daigo's account and agrees to reopen the case, but decide to keep Daigo out of it because of his connection. He accepts, leaving the case for the sake of being with his family. As Daigo leaves to meet Nakamura, a truck nearly crashes into his car. Matsuo was the one driving, and he turns himself in. He confesses to killing Kano, and as proof, leads them to his corpse. But Daigo remains skeptical. The chief questions Daigo's testimony about his attacker, but Daigo stands by his story despite the elders' conflicting testimonies. The chief warns Daigo again to stay away from the Goto family. Kisuke and other Goto members visit the corpse to pay their respects, urging Daigo to get along with them. Though Daigo wants to continue investigating, He knows he can't afford to end up like Kano for his family's sake. Daigo notices a bite mark on his shoulder, realizing that the Goto family wants to keep him from uncovering the truth about the old man. 2 weeks later, life seems to return to normal. Daigo resumes his police duties while Yuki and Mashiro live peacefully among the villagers. Daigo notices that the villagers also avoided mentioning Kano's name, not just the Goto family. One day, a villager invites Daigo to a drinking party, and Yuki asks to join. The party goes well until Daigo brings up the Goto family. A villager admits that they avoid discussing the Kano incident due to its connection to the Goto family, blaming themselves for not intervening. After the party, Daigo asks Yuki if she still wants to leave the village, but she decides to stay, feeling accepted by the villagers despite the incident. He has no right to blame the villagers for what happened to Kano. After all, he did kill someone in front of Mashiro. Now this story takes a pretty interesting turn from here. We get answers to questions that basically solve this whole mystery, but it just turns out that there's way more to the story than we thought. Not only do we know what happened to Mashiro, but now we also know what happened to Kano. Why are the Gotos avoiding Daigo? What's the deal with the old man, and why are the villagers, including the chief of police, afraid of the Goto family? This does kind of prove my theory that it's just the old man who's the big bad, but he hasn't really killed anyone that we know of, and that also doesn't explain why the old man saved Daigo. But even if the mystery isn't solved, I like the fact that Daigo basically moved on for the sake of his family. It shows a lot of character to Daigo, and it gives us more wholesome scenes of the family. We finally know the incident that made Mashiro mute, and we won't get the full details until the next chapter, but already we could paint a picture of what happened. I didn't think much about the daughter being mute. I didn't think it was really important to the story until they really revealed it to be trauma-based. Mashiro being mute also plays a really big part in the horror as well. Ninomiya states that, "When I thought of the last scene for the first chapter, if it was a normal child, they would have been able to tell their parents about the situation, and I think the sense of urgency would have been different." Even though Gannibal wasn't meant to be a horror series, the situation of a mute child encountering all kinds of horror and not being able to tell anyone of power, in a way enhances the horror element. Trauma affects everybody differently, but it's way more horrific to see and feel the trauma itself, which perfectly leads us to "5 months earlier, Daigo responds to a backup call from 2 detectives chasing down a suspect. Meanwhile, at a school event, Mashiro describes her father as a policeman who catches bad guys. But while everyone calls her dad great, she doesn't think so, because he's a violent policeman. We see Daigo brutally interrogating a suspect, seeking the names of his accomplices. After extracting the information, Daigo is confronted by a superior, warning him about his actions. Daigo is soon to be assigned to a sexual assault investigation involving children, which he's very eager to catch the perpetrator. At a park, Yuki and Mashiro are approached by Daigo, who wants to play. But Mashiro is very upset with Daigo for beating up a neighborhood boy who did things with kids, though she doesn't know the whole story. As they leave, a hooded figure, Tsubasa, the neighborhood boy, appears. Daigo warns Tsubasa to stay away from Mashiro, or else he'll kill him. However, it's very difficult for him since he's in love with her. The next day, Daigo investigates a suspect who was involved with 3 young children. Mashiro sneaks out to visit Tsubasa, thanking him for his kindness but saying that they can't play anymore. Daigo receives a call that Tsubasa let a child into his house and rushes over. Police knock at his door and Mashiro begins to call out to her dad. Daigo, panicking, breaks in and assaults Tsubasa. Mashiro tries to intervene but is pushed aside. Daigo's partner tackles him and Mashiro cries, questioning why he would act this way. As a cop escorts Mashiro out, Tsubasa slashes the cop's ankle and holds Mashiro at knife point, demanding Daigo shoot him. Daigo, forced to act, shoots Tsubasa. After the incident, Mashiro becomes mute and emotionless, prompting the family to move to Kuge village. In the present, the family and villagers celebrate New Year's. Back at home, Daigo thanks Yuki for supporting him through everything. As they start to get intimate, Daigo notices someone watching through the window. Outside, he finds "Murderer" painted on their house. One of the Goto members from Kisuke's group was responsible for the graffiti. The villagers quickly clean it up, but soon after, Daigo receives a call about another incident. He meets up with Kisuke, who has turned in the suspect. He had been bragging about peeping on Daigo and Yuki, but denied being the one who vandalized their house. Daigo, suspicious, believes it could only have been another Goto. Kisuke, offended by this accusation, questions if Daigo is trying to provoke a fight. Tensions rise as Kisuke points out that Daigo is placing too much trust in the villagers, who were the ones that ostracized the Kanos in the first place. Daigo is reluctant to believe this, but while Kisuke insists that Mutsuo was the one who killed Kano, the villagers were the ones that pushed them to that brink. Not only did Sumeri's father lose his sanity, but so did her mother. We see Sumire visiting her mother in the hospital, who doesn't recognize her and mistakes her for a villager. In her confused state, she talks about her missing husband and her wanting to escape, repeating the words "run" over and over. As this unsettling scene unfolds, one of the villagers casts a suspicious look towards Yuki and Mashiro. Now there's a lot to unpack here, but it's pretty hard to think of Daigo as a hostile person. We did get a little glimpse at that in the first volume, but never to this extent. It makes sense now why he was a well-known detective who had to leave the town for not only his, but his family's mental health. It's great to see more family time, but the switch from a happy, wholesome relationship to a realistic, grungy one is very jarring. Daigo isn't a bad guy, he's just a very angry person, especially towards criminals. He might have a backstory with a certain criminal, or maybe it was just the hatred of Tsubasa that made him this way, but it was really hard to read the last part of the flashback, and it was still pretty difficult to read the scene of Mashiro talking about her dad. Like I said throughout this whole video, this situation is very realistic. It's very normal for a child to speak without a filter. I'm happy to see that Daigo and his family are living happily, but this series wouldn't be going if there weren't some setbacks. The Goto family are making some moves, but it's revealed that it wasn't them that graffitied the house, but it must have been someone that knows about Daigo's past. I was wrong in saying that the villagers aren't bad people, that it's just the Goto family, but it's definitely implied that something shady is going around. Or it could just be another misdirection like what happened at the end of volume 1. But we'll most likely not know that until next time. When first making this video, I really thought that I would cover 3 or 4 volumes just to get it out of the way, but I grew to be glued by this series, so much to the point where I had so much to say, I had to split the volumes into literally 2 parts. Gannibal, for a series that wasn't meant to be horror, masterfully intertwined elements of horror, mystery, and psychological drama to create such a realistic and immersive narrative. From the unsettling depiction of cannibalistic rituals to the intricate relationships between the villagers and the protagonist's family, Gannibal keeps us at the edge of our seats. The realistic portrayal of trauma and the moral complexities faced by Daigo and his family just add layers of depth to make this story both compelling and thought-provoking. So far, only the first 2 volumes are translated into English, but I wouldn't mind reviewing 3 and 4 in a later future. So comment down below if you're really interested in that. But I absolutely love this series, and it's clear that Gannibal isn't about the cannibalism, but it's about uncovering the dark truths in Kuge Village. But thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Again, if you guys want me to cover volumes 3 and 4 of Gannibal, just let me know in the comments below. Make sure to join our Discord server so you can be a part of our community and have a bunch of updates on stuff. If you guys want more horror, anime, and manga content, then why not hit that subscribe button? But I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.